Uh, what kind of music do you usually have here?
Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and western.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. This week on Baseball by Design, we are going to be talking about the Triple-A Nashville Sounds, an affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers. Later on in this episode, I'll be speaking with designer Brandon LaMarche of 3-2 Designs. He created the Sounds' alternate Brewskis identity. I'll be speaking with Celini Aubrey of the Hatch Show Print, the iconic graphic design institution in Nashville. And of course, Dan Simon will be here with one of his Studio Simon Stumpers. Right now, I am so pleased to welcome Jeff Hem to the broadcast. Jeff is the play-by-play broadcaster, officially the director of broadcasting, but we'll just say the play-by-play broadcaster for the Nashville Sounds. Jeff, good morning. How you doing?
Paul, I'm doing great. Thanks for reaching out and good to talk to you today.
Well, I'm super psyched to talk about this brand. It's a minor league classic, absolute, classic ballpark, classic brand, classic team. This brand could very easily be a major league brand. This is not a silly minor league brand. This is a serious baseball brand that if Nashville were ever to get a major league team, could just step right into this identity. That's obviously something intentional that the team is doing to have a more serious approach to minor league baseball rather than, the sort of wackier fun identities, which I love out there in minor league baseball. It's a long-winded question to get going, but what is the team's approach to that more serious type of brand?
Well, I think that's the beauty of minor league baseball is that there's room for everybody in that world, and that applies to logos and brands and slogans and things like that. The Sounds have been named the Sounds ever since their inception back in 1978. So while the look and the colors and the marks and the logos have changed a few times over the years in post 2024, 46 seasons of Sounds baseball, the name has never changed. So to your point, I agree with you that there's a strong brand there. If for no other reason, people in this market and around the country know the Nashville Sounds as a baseball team, and they know them from that way going back to 1978. You're right about the current logos and branding when it got, as we called it, remastered in 2019. That was the goal, was really to make it look more classic. There, and credit to the various ownerships that the Sounds have had over the years. To my knowledge, there's never really been any strong consideration of changing the name from the Sounds to anything else. We opened this ballpark in 2015. That's typically a logical time if a team is going to change a name to change the name. That was never really on the table. The Sounds did not want to change the name, and that's a credit to our ownership, which is still in place today. And then the first few years of the ballpark, there were new logos. And then we changed those in 2019. The biggest reason why is that the current look, the circle logo and the red and blue colors, we felt, and not that I'm taking credit for it, but in this format, I guess I'm speaking for the organization. So I'll use we felt that more classic look better included all of Nashville and not just the Broadway honky tonk component. And so the goal with the logo and the rebrand in 2019 was really to try to make all of Nashville, quote unquote, part of the story and part of who the Sounds are and have been.
One of the interesting things about the new brand, one of the things that's notable about it is that it was created by a design firm that doesn't do a lot of work in minor league baseball. It's Rare Design in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And they do a lot of work in the NBA. They've worked with the Atlanta Hawks, the Minnesota Timberwolves. That choice right there resulted in a very different look and a different feel.
I think we as a group and the folks who really were spearheading it at the time in 19 knew kind of what we wanted. It wasn't like, hey, here's a whiteboard, show us 15 different options. Let's see. It was like, I think the leadership knew what it wanted it to be, relatively speaking, and so going with a company like that that had experience with some of the teams and leagues and levels that you mentioned just made it a better fit because we already had a brand, we already had a story in part, and wanted to tell something a little bit more rather than feeling like, hey, we're going back to square one with something. What do you got?
So we've referenced it, or you've referenced it a couple of times here. This brand is named after a kind of music. And so, if you visit Nashville, it's everywhere. That Nashville sound, what is it? Why is that the inspiration for a baseball team in Nashville, Tennessee?
Well, I think it's just an homage to the fact that it is Music City at the end of the day. I think it's just a perfect fit to have the name Sounds. And again, and I don't know what the thought necessarily, if this was the thought in 1978, but I know it further aligns with what I was talking about, what we felt in 2019. It's not specific to any type of music.
Hmm.
It's not about country music specifically, even though that at least originally is what kind of put Nashville on the map. There's all kinds of different music genres that are a part of Nashville, and so the name Sounds just is all encompassing in a way that I think is a perfect fit, and that's why, to my knowledge, it's never really become close to changing from 1978 to now.
So, touching on Music City, in 2022, the team unveiled Hit City uniforms, which I really enjoyed. And that's perhaps more specific to Nashville rather than the larger area. There's a double entendre there with Hit City. What's the story behind the brand Hit City?
Yeah, well, Nashville mayor at the time, Carl Dean, when our ballpark was built in 2015, I think he originated this. He certainly used it a lot. He called Nashville the It City just because it was becoming so popular for people to move there and companies to relocate, and it was just garnering national attention. The television show was on at the time, so Nashville became known kind of larger as the It City, and so Hit City plays off of that a little bit. And then Hit City is a way that we try to make people feel like the Sounds game is going to be part of a larger experience, like the area literally and figuratively around the ballpark where we're located in Germantown in North Nashville, which is becoming more and more by the day a neighborhood feel. I'm looking right now out my window at new apartment and condo buildings that continue to go up. So we felt like, all right, we've got an area that we can kind of brand and make it feel like if you're in the ballpark, you're within Hit City, but if you're walking up to the ballpark or you're at one of the establishments around the ballpark and you're not literally inside the ballpark, you're part of the larger Hit City area. So that's really what it became. That was really the goal in coming up with that. It's specific to the Sounds, but it's not so specific to a game itself. It's the larger area and the ballpark and kind of the vibe and atmosphere that we want to create because there's so much more than just the baseball part of what makes a minor league baseball team and a Triple-A baseball team successful and popular. You've got to have a little bit of something for everything, for everybody. And so the Hit City is just kind of an overarching way to remind people that they're going to be part of something big when they come here, and a ball game is part of that, but it is not the only thing in that.
I have to say, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I went to school for graphic design. That's my background. And when I visited Nashville the first time, I absolutely had to find my way to the Hatch Show print shop. And that you're nodding enthusiastically. It's sort of a destination for designers for sure, and it's famous for creating a certain visual aesthetic. Designers will recognize something that came from the Hatch Show print shop. This sort of style of the Hit City brand, I think, evokes that with like the big block letters, the illustrative style of the skyline, the guitar on the underside of that brand. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's something that like I saw immediately. I was like, oh, that looks like something from the Hatch Show print shop.
I've got a Hat Show poster right over my shoulder here in the booth
You sure do. I see it.
from the first year of the ballpark. We gave those away to
Oh.
to fans in the early games of the stadium because, to your point, like the Hat Show print shop, for anybody who spends any length of time in Nashville, like that's just it's iconic.
Yeah.
It's another way, and like the word remastered in the Sounds remastered is a connection to the music industry. The circle logo is in some ways looks like a record, and
Yeah.
that was not unintentional. So there's just so many, and the N that's in the center of our primary logo has a curvature to the F hole of a guitar or a violin. And I'm not taking any credit for this. I was not involved in the logo design, but I will give credit to the larger team who did it, and logos in general. It's part of why I think your podcast is so cool to hear kind of the behind the scenes stories on different teams, because you could look at a logo for 10 years and then in the 11th year, you might see something that you never noticed before. And every single piece of a logo, when a team is unveiling something new, has a rhyme or reason to why it looks that way, or it's got the color. I love logos in general for that reason. And there's so much detail in our logo that I wouldn't have known unless I, knew about it when we were unveiling it. But then after the fact, you're like, oh my gosh, that looks, man, that makes perfect sense. And it's so cool. And we've got a few different elements to that. The red and blue kind of horizontal striping on the sides of our logo is an homage to the Tennessee state flag, and Nashville being the state capital, because they've got some of that striping along the side of the flag. So every part of our logo, much like other teams' logos, has a rhyme or reason to why it's there. And for us, so much of that comes from Nashville being the state capital and just the music connection that we, of course, are going to want to connect to.
To that point, there's a guitar pick, which is perhaps an homage to the previous version of the brand. There's a home plate with the 3 stars from the Tennessee state flag. The S in sounds, and I'm going to get my music terminology possibly wrong here, kind of evokes in my mind like a treble clef.
Yes.
Okay, good, good, good,
Yep.
good. I got it.
And part of that connection too, if we do our throwback Thursdays every Thursday during the season where the team wears a throwback uniform, and ever since I've been here, that uniform look is the original uniform look that the Sounds had in the in the late 70s, early 80s, which has kind of the musical note curvy S as part of it. And there's the swinging guitar man that was part of the original marks. And so the red that we have now and the navy is pulling a little bit from the original look, which was red and more of a royal blue. So even the coloring of our current look is still trying to connect to who the Sounds were at the very beginning. And because of people's ages and when they started going to Sounds games and Old Greer Stadium, we've got a large segment of our fan base that almost wants that throwback look to come back so much that it's the look all the time.
Yeah.
So at least we can do it every Thursday, and that's a very popular piece that people look for in the pro shop, whether it's the cap or the jersey or the shirt. And we didn't want to ignore that when we remastered in 2019. We wanted a piece of that to feel like it was part of the current look.
I did want to ask you about one other brand, which is an homage to your parent club. You mentioned logos being fun, logos with hidden elements. Obviously, the Milwaukee Brewers, the MB Brewers glove. Just recently in the playoffs, I couldn't believe there were still people who didn't realize that the M and the B make a glove, or the glove is made of an M and a B, I should say. But you all did an alternate brand, the Brewskis, which
Mhm.
is set in those classic Brewers colors, with a capital, a big bold slab serif N, with barley sort of integrated into it, and that classic powder blue, playing on this relationship with your parent club. I'm sure it was successful, and this brand created by Brandon LaMarche, I think, is a really good one.
Yeah, thank you. The Brewskis look and merchandise has been very popular. I mean, I love it. I love anything with the powder blue. That's kind of wheelhouse for when I was growing up. You had the Expos, you had the Cardinals, you had the Blue Jays. You had a lot of teams wearing powder blue in one way or another. So I just personally, visually love the look of the powder blue. But for us, being where we are. The Sounds have had several parent clubs over the years, Yankees, Reds a couple times, Pirates, A's, Rangers, and Brewers 2 different times, including now since 2021. So part of what we try to do in kind of telling our story and educating our fans is being proud of who we're with, and we're proud to be a AAA affiliate of the Brewers. They've been very successful the last few years. So much of their playoff team this year had come through here the last couple of years. So it was a way for us to, occasionally, 3 to 5 times a year the last 2 years to play as the Brewskis. It's a way to go with a popular look. It's a way to connect to our parent club. And sure, we've got plenty of fans who are like, duh, we know you're a Brewers affiliate, but you could have some who are coming to a game on a particular night. They may not even realize who our parent club is or some of that history. So again, in minor league baseball, where you've got to try to kind of cover all the bases and have something for everybody, the Brewskis is a unique and periodic way for us to look like our parent club, be proud of our parent club, and also show our fan base again what we're part of. The players love it, and they've got a lot of blue and yellow gear already that they get a chance to wear then outside of spring training. So it's great for them, and it's just a really cool look and a way to highlight our parent club, and it's one that we're very proud to be connected to.
I said that was the last thing I wanted to ask you about, but I realized I can't let you go without asking about the guitar scoreboard, which is an icon in minor league baseball for sure. I mean, when I was there with our Baseball Palooza trip a few years back, all of our pictures have the guitar scoreboard in the background, right? Like that's just an icon in baseball. What's the story with the guitar scoreboard?
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, our previous ballpark, Greer Stadium, had a guitar-shaped scoreboard, iconic, obvious reasons. Plenty of country music stars had been part of original ownership groups of the Sounds, and like we talked about plenty with the music industry here, that's that Greer Stadium from day one in 1978 had a guitar-shaped scoreboard. So as this ballpark was being built and conceptualized and developed, everybody knew it's like, okay, we have to continue that. There is no way that anybody would ever think we should not have it in some variety in the new stadium. Well, the old stadium was old for a reason, and the old guitar scoreboard was obviously old. There was no way to literally move that one over here. This one has far more bells and whistles. It's bigger. You can do more things. It's also our video board, obviously, and scoreboard information. We can do things on the body of the guitar, the neck, the headstock and tuners. So this one is much better than the old one, but it again is like an homage to the original. We had to have a guitar-shaped scoreboard. Literally nobody else in the baseball universe has a guitar-shaped scoreboard. So it's another way to separate ourselves. So yeah, it's massive. It helps me from the booth because it's got all the game information that I could possibly need. And like you said, anybody from out of town who comes here, there's somehow, some way getting a picture of it. It's in their background. They're doing selfies. I always see people up here on our second level making sure they get just the right angle with their selfie with the game behind them and the guitar scoreboard. It's a very special piece. And what's cool is the part of town where our previous stadium was, the ballpark is no longer there, but part of the guitar scoreboard is now in the ground over there. It's been refurbished a little bit. So anybody who goes over to that part of town who doesn't know that history is going to see some version of a guitar scoreboard. And so we're still, in a way, connected to the previous location, which I think is very special.
That's fantastic. Well, it really is it's such a beautiful place. And you talked about the neighborhood around the ballpark. There's, what we were there for Baseball Palooza. We had just spent the afternoon walking around in the downtown area. And then, of course, we went down to the ballpark. There's apartments and there's restaurants. There is notably, to my group, a beer hall right outside the ballpark. We participated there. That ultimately ended with me being roundly booed at a Nashville Sounds game because I had maybe a beer or two and I was feeling the effects of it. And I got picked out of the crowd to do one of the between innings activities where they're going to play a song and then you're supposed to keep singing that song once it ends on the microphone. Sure. And they told me where the song was going to stop and what I should sing. So they kind of set me up for success. and then it didn't stop where they said it was going to stop. And I sang what they told me to sing anyway, and everyone booed because it was terrible and wrong. So
Well, I'm sorry you got booed, but you got a great story to tell out of it.
I did, and they gave me the prize back anyway because they felt bad for leading me astray.
Nice, nice.
Jeff, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. Where can people find the team? Where can people find you on online?
NashvilleSounds.com is our website, and Nashville Sounds is pretty much the handle on all the social media channels. I'm on there as well, Jeff Hem PBP, as in play-by-play. Really fun to talk to you. I'm very proud and feel very fortunate to be part of the organization, and to get to call games in this ballpark. So thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about the Sounds history, because it's a proud one for us, and I'm blessed to be part of it.
Well, I really appreciate that. And it's, one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is to talk to people who are proud of their communities and of their teams and of these brands. And so it's a labor of love for me to be able to share those stories. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day, and look forward to meeting you in person the next time I get to a Nashville Sounds game.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All right.
Paul.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm so pleased to welcome back to the podcast Brandon LaMarche of 3-2 Designs. Brandon, good morning. How you doing?
Good. How about you, Paul?
We've spoken before. You've done a lot of work for the Bowling Green Hot Rods. This is not the Bowling Green Hot Rods. This is the Nashville Sounds. And they've got this fantastic alternate brand that is based heavily, obviously, off of their parent club, the Milwaukee Brewers. And you created the branding for that. Before we get into the actual branding, the story of this branding is pretty interesting. You posted on social media. You said, "This design is the longest I've had to wait from when we finished it to when it made its real life debut. We completed this project with the Sounds right before the pandemic, and then the jersey just made its on-field debut last season. With the hat making its debut this season, the uniform is complete." That was in April of this year that you said that. So it's 2024, and you started working on this pre-pandemic. So this has been a long-range project. What was that? What was that experience for you as a designer?
It was kind of typical with COVID stuff. Right before COVID, and even at the beginning of COVID, minor league baseball was really kind of preparing for Major League Baseball to take over. And they all knew there'd be new guidelines, new due dates and stuff, and things were going to be kind of crazy and more restrictive. So there was a lot of projects kind of thrown together real quick to make sure that they would be able to get that stuff in before those new restrictions would come up and things would take longer to do. And that was a project that did that. And when COVID did happen, everything got shelved. And I don't even know how many projects got released the following season. So this was one of those that I think they just kind of sat on and kind of waited for the right moment.
Well, like I said, it's a really fun brand, and I'm glad to have you on to chat about it, because it's, it plays off of the powder blue, right? Powder blue is so popular these days as sort of a retro look. Obviously, a big part of the Milwaukee Brewers branding. When you're a designer working with sort of a classic look like that, how much do you work to sort of make it your own, and how much do you really just pay tribute to, this classic look and feel that the Brewers had?
Well, originally when we did this project, pre-pandemic, we were actually going to pay homage to the American Association Milwaukee Brewers because their colors were the Sounds colors, the red and blue. And they thought that we would do like a cream kind of throwback. And then later, when we went back and they wanted to redo this project a couple of years later, then they're like, let's switch up and just do the powder blues. And I think they were seeing kind of the marketability with partnering with the Titans and the Nashville Predators.
Well, so tell me about the parts of this that are uniquely your creations here. We have the N and the B both have sort of a barley element in them. Where is that from? Is that a unique creation, or are those elements from the Brewers branding?
So really, it's combining what are the major elements from the Brewers branding, especially since at that time I believe they had just rebranded with, I believe, Rare Designs did their branding. And so it was like, well, how can we combine what the brewers are, obviously trying to focus on, and obviously they have the barley in almost every of their branding except the famous glove logo.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like, okay, what can we do to be unique? And also, when you look at it, you're like, yep, that's associated with the Brewers. So that's kind of what we did. And the N and B logo kind of pay homage to a little bit to the Honky Tonks logo I did for them. While was my first one I did, where they wanted to incorporate like an N neon signs and kind of shove a guitar through the N. So it was like, okay, it was kind of a no-brainer to let's see if we can, make a Brewers version of that where we kind of add an element in that negative space.
The Honky Tonks logo is another fun one. It's got, some sort of classic like guitar and sort of neon feeling about it. Before we get away from that Brewski's logo that you worked on, I wanted to talk about the typeface that you used there. Is that how much of that is your own, and how much of that draws from existing artwork that the Brewers had?
The typeface, I actually asked the Milwaukee Brewers for their font. I got in touch with their design team, and they gave me that to work with. So the font on the jersey that says Brewskis, that's all the Brewers font. And originally we didn't have that because they weren't when we started this project, they weren't the Brewers affiliate yet. They just knew that they were going to be at the time, because I believe they hadn't announced that Major League Baseball was restructuring the minor league system. So it was kind of a hush hush project
Hmm.
at that time. But then the Nashville above it is actually the Sounds hat show print style kind of font. It's kind of like a marriage between the two because they really are very similar.
You sort of threw that out there, and I'm excited because we're going to be speaking with someone from the Hat Show print shop in the next segment here. But what do you mean when you say the Sounds Hat Show print shop font that they have?
So I wasn't a part of the rebrand when they did it with Rare Design, which also did, Milwaukee's rebrand, but I knew from the talking with the team and kind of the whole process that the Rare Design team wanted to create a unique font that was, Nashville style. And they really paid homage to kind of the Hat Show print, which people don't know is a famous printing place in Nashville that do all like the famous honky tonk, posters and concert posters and stuff.
So as you were working on this Brewski's process, I mean, we've talked about the existing brand. Did you explore any other avenues? Did you go down any other paths and work with any of their other logos?
Yeah, so when this was just it started as an idea, it wasn't a kind of an official project yet. When me and Adam started working on this, we kind of just spitballed some ideas and came up with kind of the first idea just to see if it would work. We weren't sure if it was something we would be allowed to do, but we did a Nashville Sounds version of the ball and glove logo.
So I'm
Yeah.
so I'm looking at this on screen right now, and it is an N and an S, and the
Mhm.
S is wrapped around the baseball, and yeah, it forms a baseball glove.
Yeah, this was more of just kind of like a tongue-in-cheek nod when we did
Yeah.
it, and before we got approved to do this project, Major League Baseball came back told us you can't do that. So it was one of those like, we took our shot. So it's, something funny that we wanted to do. And so some other designs, once we got this project rolling, we're just trying to see what we could do with the whole Brewski thing, because the whole Brewski thing really comes from this area in the ballpark called the Bandbox. They're basically a bar in right field. You literally can just buy a cheap bar ticket instead of an actual game ticket, and you can just hang out in
Nice.
this right field. So we did a couple of designs to kind of reflect that. And so we took Booster, their mascot, and gave him a little bit of a, I guess you would say like a facelift, so to speak, and gave him a little hot chicken. And and this design actually kind of precursors the hot chickens designs we did that they came out with 2 years ago.
Yeah, so we're looking at like a super cool sunglasses wearing version of the mascot. He's holding a beer and looks like like I said, it's now like 8:20 in the morning here, but I'm ready for some Nashville hot chicken. I love a Give me Hattie B's Nashville hot chicken any time of day, right? Like, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. I want that on a hat, man.
Yeah. And then, like I mentioned before, when we started, we wanted to pay homage to the original Brewers team from the American Association. I think their last season was 1954. And so we took the old school Barrelman logo and put Booster in it, in the barrel, kind of like those old cartoons you might see.
Absolutely.
And so this one I really wish they would have put on the sleeve, because I thought they would have worked no matter what.
That is really fun. Yeah, because it's an obvious connection to the Barrelman logo, but it has the angry hot chicken in it instead of Barrelman. So
Yeah.
that's that one's great too. These are fun, man. This is maybe we'll see these at on an alternate someday, an alternate to the alternate.
So
Yeah.
this would have been all like an all cream uniform, red and navy, and so it would have been kind of a fun, different alternate.
Well, these this alternate universe of 1954 American Association Brewers looks. These are really fun, and we'll definitely share them on social media when this episode comes out. Brandon, thank you so much for bringing these along and showing these off. That is certainly is fun to see designs that I've never seen before and react to them in real time. And I didn't even really know too much about the branding of that 1954 Brewers team, so that's it's cool to get a little education on that as well. So in the meantime, hey, people can find these probably on your social media as well. Where do people find you online and on social media?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Lamarche32. And then my website is 32designs.net.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. This was fun.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am thrilled right now to have Celini Aubrey, who is the print shop manager and the director of Hatch Show Print in Nashville, Tennessee, on the podcast. Celini, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm sort of fanboying right now, actually, because this is Hatch Show Print in the field of graphic design is iconic. Rather than having me explain why Hatch Show Print is iconic, could you explain what it is that Hatch Show Print is, what it means to Nashville, what it is that you all do?
Sure, I'm happy to. I have the joy of working in a 145-year-old advertising and print shop. We do letterpress printing all of the time, which is letters pressed into paper with ink in between. It's always been that way since the business opened in 1879 to today. We have presses running right now. And the shop has done show poster advertising, all sorts of printing for the Nashville community, for businesses and organizations and things like that. It's been doing it for 145 years. The design never left the shop. So in the mid 20th century, or even a little bit earlier, when graphic design was coming into its own as its own, full-blown career path and also business and entities, and they were separating from the print shops, it never separated from Hatch Show Print. So we design everything we print, and we only print what we design at Hatch Show Print, and it's always been that way. It is all letterpress all the time. And, in addition to doing tons of show posters or entertainment posters for artists as wide ranging as, from gospel and classical music to rock and roll and country and Western and everything in between, we've also done a lot of advertising for basically anything that you would want to let people know about happening, so you could sell tickets or get them in the door. And that certainly includes baseball. So since 1887, we know that we've been doing advertising for baseball. Nashville had a team in 1887 for all of maybe 10 months called the Nashville Blues, we believe, based on our research. And we have a 78-inch tall baseball player carved in 3 blocks of big pieces of wood in the shop. And actually, technically, it's carved in 15 blocks because with letterpress printing, it's one color at a time, one piece of paper at a time. And so to make him 78 inches, he's 3 sheets pasted together, and each baseball player that we print takes 5 colors to print.
All right, is that available? This is obviously not a planned question here. Is that available on your store? Could I purchase that and put it up out here in the Sunday Helmet Hall
Yes.
of Fame?
Yes, you could. You
That is
could.
amazing. Okay, this I now have a research project for as soon as we are done talking here. Um, One of the reasons that I was excited to have Hat Show Print represented on this episode of the podcast is because the baseball team obviously is called the Nashville Sounds. You all have been involved with musicians and the music industry in Nashville for, I'm assuming, the entirety of your 145 years in existence. In specific, I'm getting this from your website. I don't know this offhand, but you have relationships with Grand Ole Opry stars and the Ryman Auditorium. You're part of the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. I think most importantly, the fact, what you said about the fact that the design happens in-house, and that everything you print is designed in-house, means that Hat Show Print is largely responsible for the visual aesthetic that we associate with a certain kind of music and a certain era of music. And you're still involved with that, to this day. That's huge, right? Like, that's huge. And I will say I have visited your facility there, so it's not the biggest facility in the world, right? To know that this operation is responsible for such a big part of the music industry is really incredible to think about.
You phrased it so beautifully there. It's interesting, people, because the shop is older than the Ryman Auditorium. The shop is older than the Grand Ole Opry, and WSM Radio, which started broadcasting the Grand Ole Opry. And the Grand Ole Opry turns 100 next year, and Hatch will turn 146. So by the time the Grand Ole Opry came along, Hatch really already had a lot of experience doing advertising posters for the millions and gazillions of variety shows, ranging from zoos that would pop up between two brothers because one of them had a, crazy looking llama or something like that. And then they, put something on the dog and then would trot it around the Tri-County region or something like that, ranging from that to tent revival show meetings to opera singers who were touring out of New York and traveling across the country. So by the time the Grand Ole Opry came along, Hatch had a pretty good idea of how to get the faces out there. And what the thing I like to say is, what's fantastic about WSM is that it was the second clear channel station. So it was broadcasting to 30 states at the same time. So folks from as far away as Alaska and Florida were listening to the same music basically at the same moment. They could hear it, but they didn't know what these folks looked like. And so I always like to say that the posters that Hatch made to advertise when Roy Acuff or Minnie Pearl or Bill Monroe were going out on the road put the faces in front of the folks who had been listening to these wonderful performers and didn't quite know what they looked like. And so it was like the foot in the door for them, to remind them to go out, save their money, and go out that Saturday night to see them when they traveled through town.
The aesthetic that you associate with like hand-pressed, letterpressed prints is different from the graphic design you see generated on computers now. It seems like this is one of those trades that logically could have gone away with the advent of computers, and the fact that it's still around really speaks to the power of it. It's an audio only podcast, so the listener can't see what you just did when I said that there. In spite of the reaction that you just had, I'm going to try to finish the question and let you react to that. It does seem like the fact that hand pressed prints have survived in spite of computers being around and sort of being the main focus for most graphic designers, speaks to the power of that aesthetic of hand pressed, letter pressed printing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, really. One of the things that has kept Hat Show Print in business is its ability to everything is created by us, and so there is no one else we have to confer with if we need to alter the product. And there has never been that problem through the history of the shop. And so in the, say, post-World War II, there was an entertainment boom and a sort of leisure time boom across the country. The soldiers came home. We weren't worried about producing things to support them when they were fighting overseas and things like that, coinciding with the rise of the automobile and its ability to transport people longer distances more comfortably so that they could spend their leisure time taking a road trip or something like that. All of that put increased demands on the shop. And so while they did continue to do some large format advertising, billboards and things like that, they also leveraged technology that sort of had been put on pause, namely the photoplate technology, because metal was being, used for the war effort and things like that. But post-World War II, it was both the rise of the next generation of young people wanting leisure entertainment, the rise of that entertainment happening, i.e. rock and roll in 1955, early 50s, most notably with Elvis Presley in 56, and the technologies and all of these things combining, the shop had to figure out a way to respond. And one way they figured out a way to respond was, instead of carving a gorgeous 2-color portrait of every single country artist or every single artist they were doing posters for, that's when the photoplates became ubiquitous, not only on hat show print posters, but on many show posters. It's that mid-century boxing style, as we call it, poster. The artist could then represent themselves most directly in the clothes they were wearing. I think about the Man in Black, Johnny Cash, for example, and Elvis Presley in his gold lame suit or something like that. Those full body photo plates that we have of those are both of those guys on posters, and then other artists and how they wanted to present themselves. It allowed that technology meant that we could make more posters faster. The size of the poster shrank dramatically because we were making more posters. So instead of these 26 by 40 sheets of paper, pasted up next to each other, it might have been a 14 by 22 stapled to a telephone pole or to a series of telephone poles. And so the shop had to make more posters faster. And so that was the mid 20th century. And Hatch existed in Nashville, which was Music City, USA. It was then, and it still is, a working music industry / creative arts town. All of those folks, Colonel Parker didn't want to have to start over with another design firm who would then contract the work out to possibly an offset printer. He just wanted to come to Hatch and bring the last poster with the information all crossed out and the new dates set in there, whether it was for Elvis Presley or somebody else he managed. So that kept the shop running through that transition from everything being letterpress printed in America up until the mid 20th century into the late 20th century. And country music hit a huge wave of popularity right after World War II into the late 70s and early 80s. And so the shop was extremely busy. And then at the dawn of the digital design era, late 80s with the internet and desktop publishing, and then everything starting to become digitized, the shop was able to carry on doing work for, these folks who just wash, rinse, repeat. They needed the advertising posters. They still knew how to get to their audiences. They knew the poster was successful, so they just kept using it. But on top of that, when computers first came out, there were, maybe 5 different typefaces available. And none of them, for example, were probably the historic typefaces that a company like Jack Daniels used to advertise. So they would come to a place like Hatch where we could typeset that, proof it, and then that would become digital art that could be then used for magazine advertising and things like that. And as the pendulum swings, I know I'm talking and talking and talking.
No, that's okay. And I could talk to you about this for hours, so I'm just going to let you go.
Okay. And then as the pendulum swings, as we know, it's sort of, I liken it to the fact that vinyl hasn't fully died yet.
Yeah.
Because the further you go away from something, the whatever it is, there's always going to be that curiosity about what came before. And so there have always been people who have been interested in and still physically connected, feel like a visceral reaction to something that is made by hand and something that is printed, letterpress printed. It's got texture. It can sometimes even have smell, depending on how recently it was printed. You can hold it. And in the late 20th century, that combined with the fact that artists were starting to have to figure out other ways of earning income than from record deals and the sales of records and or vinyl, they started turning to alternative revenue streams such as merchandise. And so on top of a t-shirt or a hat or the CD or the vinyl record, a poster is a great piece of memorabilia that you can take away from a concert to remind you of the evening. And all of those things combined have sort of propelled a place like Hat Show Print from the late 20th century into the 21st century and kept us in demand. And the Ryman Auditorium, after the Grand Ole Opry left in 1974, it was sat empty for basically 20 years, and then it reopened and it reestablished a tradition with working with the shop to have a poster made for every show that happens there. And thankfully, Hat Show Print continued to make posters for them. And I like to say the design of the posters that we do today is a response to the way the artists are all presenting themselves, because we're making these posters almost in real time. I mean, sometimes the last layer of ink is being printed the day before the show. So it's very timely in terms of being able to respond to whether they have a new album out or they have decided to go in a totally different artistic direction, and we can respond to that visually with our posters. So our posters today are a bit like, I think Charles and Herbert and Will T would be proud, because we've gone back to that very visual appeal of the posters, the advertisements, and the billboards that they were making. We've just done it in a smaller format and with way more color in the 21st century.
You touched on a lot, but one thing, if you ever, if we ever get the chance to catch a Nashville Sounds baseball game and we have a few innings, I'd love to get into the difference between a typeface and a font. You used the word typeface, which I love. We won't do that here because then that's another hour.
Yep.
But I'll get out of here on this. One of the things that I love about Hat Show Print, I liken it to the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, where it's part museum and you can see these amazing things that they've created, but you can also get in there and see the work being done, right? And the work is sort of mesmerizing and amazing as well. And so to see the work happening in real time, but then to see these amazing artifacts of this place and this industry is just it's an amazing place right there. And it says on your website, 100,000 annual visitors. So this is something that draws people like me to absolutely come check it out. Selene, like I said, I could talk about this all day, but I do need to stop at some point. So I'll wrap up just by asking, where can people find the work that you're doing, that amazing baseball print that I'm about to go research, and everything else that you do online?
Well, you can find us on our website, hatshowprint.com, and you can find us on social media. Just search Hat Show Print. And we have a baseball player hanging up actually in the shop and is available to look at in our gift shop as well. So you can see the one you'd be taking home, among other sports things. I will say Charles and Herbert must have been sports fans. I know Will T was a sports fan because we have a history of having done some great posters for sports, whether it was college or for the Nashville Sounds or the earlier iterations of the Sounds or the Negro Leagues. So, and we do tours. People could come and learn about the history of the shop, see us in action, and actually hand ink and print their own commemorative print to take home with them if they like.
Amazing. Well, It's an incredible place and it's an incredible story. And I'm so glad that we got to tell it here on the podcast. Selene, thank you so much. This has been everything I hoped it would be.
Thank you, Paul. Have a great day.
All right, everyone, welcome back. As always, I'm very pleased to welcome my friend Dan Simon to the podcast. Dan, good morning. How are you doing? You've got another Studio Simon stumper for us this week. I hope I get it right.
I am doing well. I can even go so far as to say I'm fantastic,
Oh,
Paul.
thank
So
goodness. I was very concerned there for a moment that we were going to break that streak.
So let's go right into this Studio Simon stumper, shall we?
Yeah, okay. Buckle up. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. Nashville Sounds is not just the name of a baseball team. There is actually the Nashville Sound, which is not a body of water, but it is a subgenre of country music that originated in Nashville, Tennessee in the mid to late 50s, right around then. It's hard to put an exact date on it. About the Nashville Sound, the difference between the country music that it predated and the Nashville Sound was that instead of the fiddles and steel guitar that was popular in country music up to that point, it used things more associated with traditional pop music at the time, like strings, choruses, background vocals, and kind of had a smoother sound, if you will, and even if you won't. So, with all that in mind, our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, which of these former minor league cities also had a style of country music attributed to it by name, like the Nashville Sound? Was it A, Jackson, Mississippi, B, Bakersfield, California, or C, Tucson, Arizona?
So the question is, there is a musical style that is called either the Jackson Sound, the Bakersfield Sound, or the Tucson Sound.
Correct.
All right. So I think the place that I associate most with music of those three is Jackson, Mississippi. But I'm going to say that the Jackson Sound is a red herring, to borrow a phrase that you used on a recent stumper when you threw the Brooklyn Cyclones into a question about Adam Sandler's childhood. I'm going to say that the Jackson Sound is a red herring. The Tucson Sound, I'm having trouble sort of coming up with what that might be. Here's why my heart is leading me to the Bakersfield Sound. Bakersfield is a super interesting town, like kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's in an agricultural spot, but it's got like a real heavy like Basque population there, and it has sort of like interesting restaurants and whatnot. So I'm gonna say, because there's a lot of Jacksons out there. So if you were just to say the Jackson Sound, you wouldn't really know where that was coming from. So I am going to go not with the Tucson Sound. Jackson Sound, I think, is a red herring. I'm going to go, there was a musical subgenre, a musical style called the Bakersfield Sound.
Paul, a new winning streak has started.
Yes.
That was, even though you did some major sussing there, I don't know if it was still, I think, somewhat of a wild guess, or not. But you got it right. It just, I don't.
It was a hunch. It was a hunch.
Well, your hunch was worthy of the guess, and here you go. So the Bakersfield Sound was developed around the same time as the Nashville Sound, as a reaction to the slickly produced Nashville Sound, and it was a move back to the kind of honky-tonk sound that the Nashville Sound was moving away from. Well-known performing artists from the original Bakersfield Sound era included the likes of Merle Haggard and Buck Owens. And now this was something that I did not learn about in researching this stumper. I can't tell you where I originally heard about it, but I would say it was probably in doing research for something minor league baseball team branding related. I was not doing a project for Bakersfield, but somewhere in previous research I've done, I learned about the Bakersfield Sound. And I wish I could remember what it was. And frankly, I'll tell you what, it might have been one of the reasons I mentioned Jackson, I put Jackson, Mississippi in, is because just this season, might have been last season, this past season, it might have been 2023, but either 2023 or 24, the Mississippi Braves introduced a new mascot that is based on a blues artist. If I'm not mistaken, it's B.B. King. It could have also been, oh no, I think it was Bo Diddley. It was Bo Diddley. So there's some connection to, if not Bo Diddley specifically, but blues music to Jackson, Mississippi. And the GM of the Mississippi Braves, who's Pete Lavin, who's now the GM of the Columbus Clingstones, he had contacted me about his idea for doing that mascot, and he wanted to know my opinion of it or whatever. I didn't end up doing any actual work on it other than, if I remember correctly, I was thinking, like, is there really a connection? And I was doing some research, and that I think it was then that I learned about the Bakersfield Sound for some reason. Most of the things I know, even if they're not about baseball, I probably learned about them because of baseball.
I feel the same way, actually. That's most of the knowledge I have, especially about, knowledge about the United States of America, is born of some minor league baseball brand. I'd be remiss, Dan, if I did not bring up the fact that the original Baseball Palooza was just me and my friend Jeremy, and it was in Southern California, and one of the stops was Bakersfield, California, and we went to see a Bakersfield Blaze game. That's where I met Philip Geary, one of the funniest people you'll ever meet, former guest on this podcast. And it's also where I learned about the stadium that they played in, which was built facing backwards, so that they had to pause the game so that the sun could set over the center field wall, because it was blinding batters, because normally they're facing the other way and the sun setting behind them. And also learned about one of the funniest minor league baseball brands, the predecessor to the Bakersfield Blaze for just a couple of years, was the Bakersfield Gunslingers, who had this, richly illustrated, highly detailed gunslinger character who Philip loves to point out is wearing cowboy boots with spurs, but they're also cleats. He's wearing spurs with cleats. That Philip always likes to say that. So Bakersfield, I have a fond memory of Bakersfield seeing a game there in 2014, the first ever Baseball Palooza, kind of like the prequel to Baseball Palooza, because that was the one where Jeremy and I posted about it on Facebook, and all of our friends were like, wait, we want to do this. And then it became Baseball Palooza.
I lived in the Los Angeles area for close to 18 years, and I went to minor league baseball games in many of the surrounding towns, like Rancho Cucamonga, High Desert, which was in Adelanto, San Bernardino, but I never went to a game in Bakersfield, and I really should have.
It was a terrible ballpark, but a great baseball experience. And one of my favorite stories there is when they had the sprinklers went off in the middle of the game and flooded the field. And one of the opposing, this story is detailed on the Bakersfield Blaze episode of this podcast, but basically they had the idea of, let's pour gasoline on the field and set it on fire to get rid of the water. And long story short, they played the rest of the season with half of their field completely scorched.
Well, there we have it. So
Indeed.
Things you learn about through minor league baseball, which is the whole reason for your podcast.
Dan, we always say where people can find you online. People can find you at studioassignment.net. People can find the Baseball by Design podcast now on Instagram, on Threads, and on Blue Sky, all at Baseball by Design. Brand synergy. We're finally getting there, Dan. I hope you have a great week.
Paul, to you as well. See you next time.